I'm your host, Dr. J. Andy Ilias, with my co-host, Joe Kiernan, and we have an amazing show for you today. We are researchers on a mission for the truth, and in this case, we know the godfather of free energy, John Searl and Bradley Lockerman are joining us here today. This man has what we need to change the world. Now, other than that, the phone number, if you want to call in, chime in, and ask Mr. Searl or Mr. Lockerman a question, the phone number is 818-923-1713. Once again, 818-923-1713. And without any further ado, Mr. Lockerman, I'd like you to come on in, Mr. Searl. I believe he's coming back on right now. He's on. There we go.
Hello, John. Good to be with you and Joe.
Hello, Bradley. Mr. Searl, how are you this evening?
Must grumble, it's early morning.
In the UK, we just want to remind the viewers that Mr. Searl is making a great sacrifice coming here in the middle of the night to speak with us and to speak particularly with you, the listeners. He has such an amazing story to tell. From the last time we had him on, there have been some new current updates. But real quick, why don't we just give people the background, the brief in a couple minutes. Bradley, maybe you can tell it with Mr. Searl telling it of what's been, where he comes from, what's happening, and what made him so famous with his free energy devices. And then let's go into what's going on with what's new.
Glad to do it, John. Real quick, 1932, a man is born in Wantage, England, born basically in a workhouse to difficult circumstances. They took him, Dr. Bernardo's Homes, which is a charitable concern in the UK for children, took charge of him at a young age, put him through school, where he ended up at the... Actually, he had the dreams. John will mention the dream sequences, and they were repeated dreams regarding the law of the squares. But he goes ultimately to the Naval Academy at Poole, Russell Coates Naval School. And then in 1946, he's apprenticing as an electric engineer and is working at British Rewinds, where he comes up with the first of the SEG devices that would later be developed through the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's a remarkable series of developments because John will say, and I'm not speaking for him, of course, but he will tell you that he was in the right place at the right time. John, why don't you hit on that 1946 situation at Crawley Road?
Yes. At Crawley Road, I had perhaps one of the most wonderful landladies you could ever have. She was so excited about the work I was doing, or trying to do, let's put it in precise terms, was trying to do. She would hold wires for me to solder, and then she said, "It won't blow the fuse." "Oh, no, switch it on, bang!" And she would jump in the air. "I thought you said it wouldn't blow the fuse." And it should do. I've got to find out why did it blow the fuse. But she was Welsh. She was a tomboy, you can say, and she used to try to get me in trouble with a milkman who was also Welsh. But he knew she was Welsh and knew I had no idea what I was saying to him.
John, what was that device you were working on in the kitchen there?
Well, it was supposed to be a generator to produce electricity to run all the power of a house on. Unfortunately, there was no technical books, no scientists who would warn me that I was running a risk of creating instant weather conditions within the house. There simply were no technical books, and they said it was impossible. There's no way can you make that weight hang on that ring, that plate as I call it, and if you tried to move it, it would shoot off. It turns out we were all wrong. I thought they were right. I was wrong to think that because they were experts. You see, it shouldn't took off. Its gravity should have held it. But unfortunately, these days I realise that if you make a small unit like that and compress energy, it's going to go superconductor. And the Earth is a magnet, and it's going to take off, whether you like it or not. So please, all future young experimenters, do your work outside for safety.
So, John,
Costs a lot of money today.
John, this was the first SEG, and you're saying that when it powered up, it went superconductor. Therefore, it got cold, correct?
Yeah.
And once it got cold, it had so much energy that it lifted off the table. And what happened? What happened?
Same thing. Let's put it to if it had happened in Dudley in the Midlands. A turbine there, simply one of the little aluminium fins broke off and went into the system and stopped it dead. But all that energy had to go somewhere, and it just ripped it out the concrete floor and through the roof of the power station. And the power station was out of action for 10 years.
So this
has to go somewhere when you stop something suddenly.
And so this isn't something that doesn't happen from time to time in different electrical power instances.
In convention machines. This is not a convention machine, because what you're doing here is you are encouraging electrons to be squeezed tighter and tighter together. And that means they're getting colder, not hotter. They get hotter when they expand. But we were compressing it, so it was getting colder and colder. Then we reach around about 4 Kelvin. Then it switches over. Now, it will not stay where it is, because the Earth is a magnet. It will deflect it upwards.
And so
moving Newton's law, it continues upwards.
And John, moving it forward to the 1950s when you met George Haynes, he asked you to build 6 of the discs. What happened with those?
And the reason why he said to me, everybody walks with their head down. If you can make them look up, I'll pay the cost. And he did pay the cost, bless him. And for those 6 units, he then died, unfortunately. But he was a very highly religious man and believed that this energy was the energy from God. And therefore, he would pay the cost to develop it, so everyone would benefit from it.
And what were you trying to find out with those 6 units?
Well, because the first 1 and 2 lifted off, the question was to put the body to it. That is the problem. Getting the body to it. What sort of shape do you give it? Slowly by slowly, we basically got to the point where, yes, we get it in the air, it would hang there, glow and glow, and people's radio sets all turn on at full loudness. It was deafening. And then it shot away. The question was, why did it shoot away? What was happening to it? And then I remember that first unit that went to the ceiling, got stuck there. I had a job to pull it away from the ceiling. And after the landlady shoved a big screwdriver in and stopped the rollers rotating, could I pull it off the ceiling? But then my hands were stuck to the 2 bars that I was pulling on. And that was one of the secrets of what was happening. But then I had no knowledge about superconductor conditions, so I couldn't relate it to anything.
And the fact that
that was getting very, very cold.
And yes, the fact that your hands were sticking to the unit is because it's like grabbing a block of dry ice, correct?
Yes, yes.
Now, when you went to work at Midlands Electricity, you were very young, and you were made a foreman in charge of 11 areas at Midlands Electricity. So your job was basically R&D and fixing problems that occurred throughout the system. They challenged you to make the unit because everyone was laughing at you. Isn't that correct?
Well, that's correct. The Midlands and Yorkshire Power section were the only organisation in Britain that included hi-fi television and that within their cell products. And of course, every section had their own surface, but sometimes you get a particular TV or hi-fi that have an intermittent fault. It's not constant, it's every so often. Then that would come to me and my two other chaps that worked with me to work on why, find out why, correct it, and then return it to the depot to pass back to the customer. Then nuclear power came into being, and that became the theme of the electric boards. So the SUG was not important at all to them, but because of my position, I could get them to create things for me, make things for me. And on this particular day, Mr. Tom, my foreman, came to me and said, John, our manager, I should say, came to me, John, your workforce is laughing at you. That cannot be tolerated. There are three options. First, pack up and go. Second, shut up. Third, do it. So I said, well, first, I like my job. I don't want to go. Two, I can't shut up because I believe that this is urgent. Third, I'll do it. Right. He said, put down on paper what you need and we'll see what we got. And then he came back to say that the only thing they haven't got is the rare earth. We'll get that, but you'll have to pay whatever cost it costs to do. I said, okay. And that's how it was done. We had the right place, the right tools, the right equipment, and the right team of workers who really understood magnetism.
That's really incredible, Mr. Searle. And Bradley, thank you for leading to good questions for us there. I did have a good question for you, Mr. Searle. Can you explain to the people listening in on the process in which we get to the superconductive, more or less the arrangements of the elements necessary for these properties?
Well, the thing is, I use rare earth because I understood that if we had to get an item to move, we need a lot of negative ions to make that happen. Where in the elements could you find such materials? And of course, Mollard Limited, that was then a very big organisation in the UK, supplied me the data which showed that the rare earth, the one that was easy for me to get hold of, because the only thing they knew about it was the polished glass or to tint it purple. And therefore, it was dirt cheap. It worked out for a kilo then, in 1946, 32 cents. Now, you cannot buy 5 grams for that amount. In the UK, it's 5 years ago, that was £29 plus VAT per 5 grams. So a plate would have cost you at least £3,500 just to make that particular layer alone. So there's a big difference in cost. But the idea was that if you could speed up the rollers so fast, the electrons themselves would compress. So we had the negative ions pulling in towards the center, not pushing out. So if it's pushing tighter and tighter, it must be losing heat and getting colder. And when it does that, at 4 degrees Kelvin, the world is a different world. It switches over and water goes uphill instead of downhill. And the electrons become dark matter, dark electrons, dark photons. They're not white anymore. We have a different condition, a very powerful negative condition, not a positive one, which we work to at the present day. To get a positive state, you're burning and wasting energy, you're polluting. But on a complete negative circuit, you do not pollute and you do not increase heating. You increase cooling, which is good for the desert. 1 degree less will make a big difference to life in the desert.
You know, we're already getting another caller here, and I just want to let all the listeners know the call-in number again is 818-923-1711. No, everything is linked together. A good friend of mine was talking to me a few weeks ago after the movie Sirius had come out, which featured John Searle, and he was saying the government is not hiding aliens per se. They're not hiding the Roswell crash because they don't think we can't handle the intelligent life existing elsewhere. We can handle it. What they're really hiding is the technology. And the technology, because once it's revealed, it's going to be the free energy and it's going to collapse the oil industry overnight. And that's why we have today the godfather of free energy, John Searle, as we said earlier, who is telling us how we can change the world. He has built 3 successful devices, and that's why it's such an amazing, important topic. Everything ties in. Extraterrestrial life, the cover up by the governments, but right now we're speaking with the godfather, and it's very important for the listeners out there. If you can contribute to get this next machine to be made by John Searle, then we can really accomplish one of the biggest goals in humanity. Bradley, you want to comment on that?
Yes, indeed. Well, I think we shared with you last time that moving the story forward with John after the 50s came the 60s, and he was lecturing at St. John's Hall on Sundays to a packed audience, 400 people, news, press, general audience, and lots of scientists and degreed individuals in various disciplines. And at the end of all of the demonstrations he would do with magnetics and electrics and electronics, he would launch one of the small units for everybody to see off of what was called the Mortimer Common. John, you want to recall a little bit of that for the audience?
Yes. Well, I did everything I could in those days to get people to see that we had a solution to all the future problems that was coming up. But they came not because they didn't believe in it. They came as a day out. They saw mass of people watching the display. So they'd ask the driver to pull in at the pub there, and they would join in for the day to see what we were doing. That was all right. That meant that many people were taking photographs, taking them home, some making film clips on the old 9.5 cameras. And that for me was great. Newspapers did a mass of articles. The trouble here was that the government couldn't be seen helping me. The British government did help me. I've explained that on the internet. Why they came and raced and helped me. Because of slander remark made by the news of the world. And so they rushed in and they gave me a massive helping hand that saved me millions of pounds, which speeded up everything. Without that write-up, the government would never have given me that help. So I do thank that. I also thank the Queen for her help when she came to the throne to try to get the British government to give me a financial helping hand, which they would have done, except for Peter Barrett, who was one of the team members, who, because he had degrees, I asked him to deal with the government communication, and he told them to sort of bugger off. We could do this without your help. So the government felt that if you don't want our help, fair enough. Go ahead. And of course, today, the government can't, they depend on the power people for their next election to win. They depend on their money. They can't afford to offend them. Newspapers can't afford to upset them by writing about this work, because they'll stop advertising in their paper. So I can understand the situation why the SUG is not hot news across the world.
John, describe for the audience one of those launches at Mortimer Common, how you flew it and what happened.
You know, the whole art about this is, of course, excitement. So as we reach to the end of the day show, I would dive it as if it was going to crash. And everything goes dead quiet. As everybody holds their breath, is shocked. It's going to crash. And of course, what they don't know is that there's a bow wave ahead of it. And as soon as that bow wave comes to a stop and it strikes the surface of the earth, it's going to force the vehicle to go up again. So then it shoots straight up again.
Mr. Searle, we are going to pick this right back up when we come back from this short break. I'm your host, Dr. J. Andy Elias, with my co-host, Joe Kiernan, with a special panel for you today. Mr. John Searle, the godfather of free energy, and, of course, Bradley Lockerman. But real quick, we want to tell you, listeners, if you would want to keep the free flow of ideas coming through this channel, we got to keep it out of corporate hands. This is the largest listener-supported station, and we need your donations to keep operating. But with that being said, before we went to break, Mr. Searle was speaking about something amazing, but I want two things to happen. First, Mr. Searle and Bradley Lockerman, I want you to give the websites where they can get a hold of Mr. Searle.
Yes, glad to do that. The best place to find that, www.searlaerospace.com, SEARLAEROSPACE, one word, searlaerospace.com. And I urge everyone, read the books that he's writing right now. Fascinating work. The most important thing about Searle's work throughout his career is that he is working in magnetics, folks, and magnetics are the gateway to the ether, to the physics that is both above the quantum level functional and below the quantum level functional. Magnetics and charge, plus and minus. Searle's books are all about that. Go to www.searlaerospace.com and read his books. John Roy?
Hi, I'm afraid we lost sound for a while. The line seemed a bit bad. The problem here, I like and must make clear, the past is gone. I cannot do nothing about that. But what I can do is the present and the future, which is now top priority. It is my duty to try to solve all these major problems that affect all of us. I don't think most people realize the dangers ahead of us over the next 100 years. I'm trying to crack those problems and present you the technology that not only make your life healthier and better, but much cheaper than it is today. We need you to work with us. I want to listen to all ideas. I want us all to work together and achieve it. Don't talk about it. Do it. That's what we are doing in San Diego. We are doing it. And in China, we should be doing it. We want to do it everywhere.
You know, absolutely. John Searle is offering the solution. And if any listener out there is looking for a project or has the opportunity to fund a project, this is the place to go, because he could build a machine with the proper amount of money that can go power a little city that has no electricity and show the whole world what it's capable of. But real quick, I want to give some breaking news straight from Third Phase of Moon. Blake Cousins has a new, which is available right now, a new Seattle, Washington video shot by our correspondent from Seattle, Eric McCartney, who interviews eyewitness Ron Gilman, who has over 20 UFO videos, and these videos, the size of these objects look really big. The name of this video is UFO Sightings Massive. UFO Sightings over Seattle, Washington Special Report on Location 2013. Also, Blake Cousins telling me that my co-host, Joe Kiernan, sent some always gets amazing footage consistently, and Blake Cousins is going through it as we speak, put together something to go up on Third Phase of the Moon. There's also a few more videos up there, one of them about the perfect people, our alien abductions, another one about our aliens affecting the weather, another one being our aliens killing people. 3 great videos. They're all up there for all the world to see, and don't forget about the alien abduction diaries. Now, back to what we were talking about. Before you went on break, Mr. Searle, we were talking about, quite a few things, but I wanted to jump forward to what's new. What are the current books you are writing right now, in the present, that you were just speaking about, which is so important, because you can't change the past, of course?
The books explain how I progress through to this present day technology. It shows the pictures. It also explains how we got to move forward as an organization, how we work with the government to make sure they work and support with us, not against us. To that aim, I've always been winning, and I'm determined that the front door of our work is open to official people, FBI and all other security people. We got nothing to hide. Come in, have a cuppa, have a chat, come and see what we're doing. We got nothing to hide. If they want to place an order for one, place it there and then, like 2 FBI men have already done. Have placed an order for the first 2 SUGs off the production lines. What more can you ask for?
And John,
all to have SUGs.
John, in the books, I know you're talking about magnetism all the time. Express just a little bit about the view on magnetism, which is standard magnetism, plus and minus, or north and south. Address the difference in magnetics, just briefly.
Yeah, well, of course, in 1946, a boy 14, I was looking at these magnets that we're talking about, and they were talking about light. Light, I began to understand, are different frequencies for different color. If the electron, light, and magnetism are one and the same, which they must be, because the electric light needs the movement of electrons, which is current. Current creates a magnetic field. Therefore, they are related. If the blue is a set frequency, then its magnetic field must also be that set frequency, not that one frequency that the technical books keep telling us about and scientists keep telling us about. It is not. Every color has its own magnetic frequency, and that is what I worked on. I worked on a frequency band that match a particular color band, just like your machines that read your DVDs and CDs. They generally use light. Today, blue is the more popular one in use because you get more information on a disc with blue light. In other words, its frequency can be stored more compact. And that is what I worked on against all the experts' opinions and statements that are wrong. And the SCG stands out and proves they're wrong.
You know, Dr. Searle, I can't help but ask. I was hoping you could shine some light on to the fascinating interests of many on the inverse gravity vehicle associated with Searle Aerospace.
The main thing today, the science side is going to be terribly expensive. Yes, we are rising from the ashes of the past, but it's going to be slow work. Russell Anderson has been made in charge to do the restudy work of the design of the past flying machines, to bring it in line with modern ideas. But I'm afraid that's still some time off to find that sort of money to restart the actual building again of such devices. We're putting all our effort on the home domestic power unit, as an emergency.
Yeah,
Secondly, the car engine would have to be auto push because cars are blamed for most of the pollution, and we are being tax heavy for driving. So let's solve that problem, get rid of that pollution, drive by the SUG system, and then they have to reduce our taxes because we're not creating any pollution.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting here, Joe, that the heart and soul of an IGV, of course, is an overloaded SEG. The basic difference when you're going for the power unit is you use the square 4 from the law of the squares. And when you go for the IGV unit, which is basically the same unit, an SEG at close to the rim of the disc-shaped IGV, that goes from a square 6. John, isn't that correct?
That's correct, yes. It needs 2 more elements involved in the system to boost up the power to millions of volts, which of course we don't need for ground use like transport, rail transport, home use, hospital use, things like that. We don't need all that amount of energy. So we only need to use 4 elements, 3 elements and 1 compound.
Bradley and Mr. Searle, briefly, since we're talking about the law of squares, can you tell our listeners what it is and why, when you think about something in 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions, it's not as effective or efficient or possible?
Yeah, I'll take that first. The law of the squares is actually, people would recognize it as Sudoku or magic squares. It comes from a 5,000-year-old mathematics out of China, actually, and a person named Lo Shu, 5,000 years ago, who observed a turtle coming out of water and saw on the back of the turtle, on the shell, what he viewed as squares, little compartments, and that those compartments not only had numbers and had the ability to put values inside that number, inside those squares, but it is a 5,000-year-old mathematics, and of course we have the number 1 expert on the law of the squares because it is his. John?
Yes. And what time factor do I take to work out a square 4 with anyone putting in any number in any square?
About 17 seconds.
Right.
Now, what that means, and for the audience, you have a 4x4 square, 4x4, 16 blank squares. And I've witnessed this many, many times over. John will ask you to put a 2-digit number in any one of the squares at any time, and within 17 seconds, he will completely calculate the entire square so that the rows, the columns, the diagonals, the 4 in the center, the 4 at the corners will all add up to a balanced number. Usually, if you use 1 through 16, it will add up to 34 as the balanced number. John, I think your best is 17 seconds.
Yeah. Yes, that's because of the arthritis. If it weren't for the arthritis, I used to knock it out in 10 seconds.
If you could
go back a few years now.
Yeah, if you could write faster, right?
Yeah. Now, that is my trouble now, is the arthritis. Dropped the hold of pen. But I still don't do too bad. I haven't found anyone yet who could do it in the hour.
And just a little bit more on that. The law of the squares obviously came from the series of dreams that John had as a child. What he dreamed essentially was himself as a child playing the game hopscotch. Hopscotch, of course, is a child's game that is comprised of 8 squares in a particular order. And in that game, he throws his pebble in number 3. So you can't touch number 3, and he's standing in number 2 on 1 foot, trying to hop to number 4. So 2 and 4 are very key numbers. But what he finds in that law of the squares are not only 2 and 4 key numbers, but 8's a key number. 1 is a key number. Every number in this law of the squares translates itself into every number, I should say, in hopscotch translates itself into the law of the squares. John, is that about right?
That's right. Bear in mind that the matrix 4 squared is a code. It is code information. And from that, if you follow it precisely, you will obtain the object you are aiming for. No mathematics can do that.
And just one more thing for the audience's understanding. Sudoku, magic squares, the law of the squares. Remember this, we live in a 3-dimensional, and some, of course, including time, would say a 4-dimensional time and space. When you are looking at Sudoku, keep in mind that is one face of a 6-faced cube. Now you're in 3 dimensions, and the law of the squares is not limited to a 2-dimensional plane. Yes, you need calculations from a particular face on the 6 sides of a cube. However, it is a 3-dimensional cube with mathematical switching, which tells you how a flow of a circle can come from a square. And I'll leave it there for your audience to think about.
Dr. Searl or Bradley, there's with the number 34 in the square reference, which is really incredible that it goes back so far and it's so historic. It reminds me of an old engraving by Albrecht Dürer in the early 16th century,
yes,
where he had a square with 34 being a major key number, no matter which way you added up the columns, diagonally, horizontal or vertically, it always came to 34 as well.
Yes.
Has there always been such a mathematical draw to that historically?
5,000 years. Go ahead, John.
Remember that the DNA of squared 4 equals 13. That is something most mathematicians don't even know. The Guinness Book of Records board stated clearly to me in their communication, having studied all the work I presented to them, I was indeed number 1 in the law of the squares or the matrices. There was no way they could set this up as a competition. No one would be able to match you in the time you do them.
Yes, and to your point, Joe, yes, Albrecht Dürer and that square in the engraving, you can go back further. In fact, if you visit places like Thailand or Myanmar, some of the countries in that part of the globe, you will find etched on very ancient drawings the same 4x4 squares. They're literally found all over the planet, but very ancient mathematics. And what you're observing there is a random to uniform output, random numbers in the squares that create a uniform output. This is the key to the physics of the SEG itself. It gives you the measurements, it gives you the densities, it gives you frequencies, and in my experience with John Searl, it also gives you an understanding in 3 dimensions of what is really going on. In other words, we look at the elevated mathematicians, physicists, etc., and they're constantly thinking in a linear fashion. They create these linear, exotic algebraic equations to try to explain life, and now they're into this thing called string theory. Why? Because it fits the paradigm of linear thinking. We've got to get out of that paradigm. We've got to realize that it's not a linear situation. It is not only linear, but it is expanding in 3 dimensions as we exist in time. And what can better explain that than something that may be just this simple? Squares, but squares in mathematics that are actually a cube. A cube in a 3-dimensional space, where that inner portion, the eye of the cube, is directing energy in terms of numbers. John, isn't that
remarkable?
Yes, it is. John, isn't that the toroid can be found in the square? Can they not?
In fact, the square gave me the learning ability of everything in physics. For everything I did in the medical world, there was the law of the square looking at me. Whatever I did, the law of the square was looking at me. The first thing I could see is the law of the square. The first parts of the human body I studied, there was the law of the squares looking at me. I couldn't get away from the law of the square. Every tree, every plant, I'm looking at the law of the squares. Whatever I look at, there's the law of the squares looking at me. Whereby, in the engineering world, we have two systems. One is Newton's and the other is Einstein. And the theory is, if Newton don't fit what you experience, then Einstein will. If Einstein don't, Newton will fit. So we have two conditions there. Why? From the law of the squares, I see everything. Everything agrees with it.
And John, explain the prime states in the law of the squares, the two prime states.
The two prime states, as declared by where I'm standing in square two. To everything in this universe, there are always two prime states. They are opposite or reverse. One will be little shade greater than the other. And that is what I find in everything. Now, in some instances, they are separated by a thin line we can actually measure. And if we look at that, we can say the bulk side is the general public. The opposite side are the experts. And in between this is a fine narrow line of a group of people called inventors. Now, you don't see that line very much until the day comes they become world famous. Mostly after they're dead and gone, they become world famous.
And John, I think you've told to me many times about a single human being is comprised of two halves or two prime states.
Yes.
And isn't that...
Halves.
Yes, and
reverse. The human being, I think, on the hundreds of bodies I've examined, the back is perhaps the interesting part to see how the body cannot quite make it exactly the same. Why? Because the body employs millions of cells. These in turn have millions of atoms. And these atoms in the cell have thousands of magnets. So we have a massive complex world in every cell of the human body. Every cell is an individual world of its own right. The brain has to control all these different cells in uniform fashion. If one cell lacks, the cell just destroys it. It will not tolerate a faulty cell. But unfortunately, in the case of cancer and tumors, it generally happens too quick and the body cannot get up the power to destroy it. It depends on us to find ways of helping the body to do it. The ECG plays a big part in that by cleaning the air we actually breathe, because that is half the trouble of a lot of the faults that we suffer from. The ECG is a godsend.
Dr. Searle, if I may, Bob wanted to get one more question in before the break. Bob, do you have a question for Dr. Searle?
Yes, I do. Doctor, I'm looking at your web page where you're showing the Searle effect generator. How small can these be, and can these units be made? Can they be made small enough where they would work in a motor home or someone's mobile home?
Yeah, the ECG will be tailor-made for all kinds of problems. The one we're working on at San Diego at the moment is for the domestic unit, which is a 15 kilowatt. But if we want to go for one, which we hope will be the next one on our line of research, is for the motor car, buses, things of that kind. We are looking at something a wee bit more heavier and more powerful. Now, the size of an SUG actually depends on the material you use.
Mr. Searle, we are coming to our next break. The call-in number, 818-923-1713. Again, 818-923-1713. Now, Mr. Lockerman and Mr. Searle, I wanted to speak to you about China. Briefly, China came up in a debate, and I was wondering, maybe you could tell us what's going on with them. Are they someone interested in building this next machine?
Oh, my goodness, yes. Well, if anyone has followed the updates on anywhere from Beijing down to Hong Kong over the last several years, the most important problem for them is the pollution situation. Maybe you've seen some of the pictures, videos of people wearing masks in the middle of the day. It's just atrocious what they have to deal with. China has come a long way from when I was a kid back in the late 50s, early 60s, through the 70s even. It's a very benign society of people. If you look into history, you'll find that the Chinese never really tried to take over anybody. It was mostly civilizations that were coming in, whether it was Mongolians or the Japanese during World War II. They were always being taken over, or the attempt was made. So what we're finding with our engagement with the Chinese, it was maybe a half year back when I got an email here from a lovely woman in Shenzhen, which is in China, mainland China, and I sent it over to John, and the next time we talked about it, John Searle said to me, Brad, treat this one with the utmost respect, because I'm reading something in this email that we need to engage. So we together composed a response, and from that response, we have engaged with China. We are finishing on our engagement language so that we hope, actually, let me say this, we're due to visit China at the end of next month. We're going to Beijing with some hardware and some representatives to present John Searle's work to China. And John, how long have you wanted to be working with China?
Good 12 years. I tried to get into Beijing to talk about the technology to the Chinese people. It was a great day where our Chinese rep arrived here to meet me personally. And that is also out in my books. You can see the details. Brad was there, and he took photographs and pictures, film of the events that took place. And it was a great time, and I'm certain at last we will get into China and get this technology moving. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to be at this meeting, and I've been promised that they'll find me a nice wife if I went. My legs and feet are not being cleared yet by the doctors fit to travel such a distance. So sadly, I can only be on film at that meeting. So I will get this lovely wife they promised me.
And John Ilias, we will have a short film, and I'll send that over to you guys at Third Phase of Moon for something you can use on the website. It will show how much honor John Searle showed to the Chinese representatives. What in fact happened was our Chinese rep did arrive on a Friday, but then there were people in London from China that also took the time to come clear across to the Glastonbury area to visit John. So there were actually 2 visits from the Chinese representatives, and I will have a short piece of film for you in a few days, and you guys can have that on Third Phase of Moon.
Yes, absolutely. And when Blake Cousins received it, he will get it out to the world. You know, We're approaching 100,000 subscribers and 67 total million views, and that's a big number. If John Searle's device or the idea to produce the device or people, how can they contribute? If we get to enough people, we are truly hoping that finally we can get him recognized for what he deserves to be. This should be taught in every school. I truly believe that.
Yes, and what I'd like to say one more thing about the China visit. John Searle prepared a greeting with flags, the UK flag, the Searle flag, and he had a Chinese flag, and you'll see this when I send you the film, but he played the Chinese national anthem as the representatives arrived. John was in his Scots kilt for that, a formal kilt that he was wearing for that particular visit. And we actually had a great deal of fun. The most fun was when, and this is where you did one of those 17-second squares demonstrations. People were fascinated by that. And so, yes, we'll have a piece of film for you shortly.
Excellent. And I know Joe actually, like I said, Blake's going to be waiting for that video. Joe had a burning question. Go ahead, Joe. Joe.
Yes.
There you are.
Yes, Mr. Searle. A lot of people, when I speak on the fascinating discoveries you're making and revealing to us, they always seem to somehow corroborate it along with the Hutchison effect. Is it possible you could try to describe the difference between what you're speaking on and with the electric properties of the Hutchison effect?
Well, as I don't really have time to study other people's work, unfortunately, this work is taking all my time from the legal side, dealing with government officials to see that they're happy what I'm planning to do, because I need them to be on my side if there's a battle on this technology, to make sure it don't get stopped. And that takes a lot of effort, as you see on my book, what's happening, what's going on, and why it's so important that we do face the FBI people and C-140s and government officials and get them on our side, because otherwise they will stop this work somewhere along the line. So we must win them over, and that is my determination. I think Brad will agree that I have made this offer to all legal bodies. The door is open. Come in, have a chat, have a cuppa, and see what we're doing. We got lots of time.
Yes, indeed, and that's always amusing. Over the years, and I've been with John now 20 years, and over the many years, the dynamic has changed just a little bit. But it's amusing to hear that now. You don't have to hide in the bush. You don't have to tap the phone line. Just come in the front door. We'll talk to you about what we're doing. And, Joe, I think I can address that with John Hutchison. I have had contact with John over the years, but I've also studied everything from T.T. Brown to T. Henry Moray, even the work of Newman and Puthoff. I had to study all of those while I was building the story around John Searle. And out of all of the emergent technologies, the interesting commonality is that they are working in magnets and electrics. And again, that refers to magnetics as the gateway to the ether. And if you think, when I say ether, A-E-T-H-E-R, think of the path of education and just walk back the path of education until you come to Einstein and his theory of general relativity. There were a lot of people that smiled when relativity came out, and smiled as if, okay, yeah, but it's only going to function above the quantum level. Who were those people? Those people were Heisenberg, Tesla, Niels Bohr, and brilliant minds that understood the mathematics, but also understood that what was taking place prior to relativity. We look at relativity as a branch off of physics, that there is still a wide body of physics that is essentially been ignored. Now, I think relativity is coming back as if to rejoin the body of physics. And what Hutchison's done, what Moray did, T.T. Brown, the whole lot, T. Henry Moray, Newman, they're playing in a field with electrics and magnetics. You can even look at, Schauberger's work in Germany. It's all vortex mechanics, or it's magnetics, or it's electronics. So that of the emergent technologies that are coming out right now, we just believe that the Searl device is not as exotic as it seems, because it's a very simple prime mover in and of itself. It has a benign capacity, and it has even things that we haven't talked about, the health effects, etc. And if you want, John, speak to the health effects of being exposed to the SEG throughout your life.
The problem here is that we operate our electrical system on what I call the positive circuit. That means that every time you switch off a switch, you lose electrons. So the switch gradually deteriorates. The cable insulation gradually deteriorates. The bulb element loses electrons. When you switch on, you get 16% more energy hit that element. So it vibrates a lot, and therefore will weaken its connection to its base and will eventually break. And then, of course, you got replaced, which is good for business. On the SEG, we're looking at an opposite world, a negative world. Now, when you switch off, because you've got so many negative ions, there is no deterioration of that switch, nor is there any deterioration of the insulation on the wire. Therefore, the wire will not need to be replaced in 15 years' time, because it's unsafe. Again, your light bulb do not deteriorate. What will happen is there will be carbon arriving on the glass, and in about 15 years' time, it will look like an element of an infrared heater as regards to light, so then you replace it. So in other words, an engine of the SEG, the car, will continue to be handed down from your family to their family, and more or less, I guess, to the end of time. All you do is take the shabby body off and put a body you like on, and away you go. It means, too, that checks really only need to be done every 2 years on the electric motors turning the wheels, for insulation, to make sure the insulation is okay. There's no exhaust or anything to worry about, no pollution. The temperature in the car will be the natural temperature you want, day or night, winter, summer, whatever it is. You switch on the way you go. Now, that's the world I would like everyone to have. A world that is clean, at a negative state, so you feel good, you heal quick when you have accidents, and above all, your wife cooking for you. Lifts the lid, gets scolded by the steam. That is painful, I know. I've experienced it a few times. But the SEG operating in the room cools that very quick, and that stinging ends, and repairs starts immediately. Your blood cannot take down enough electrons to rebuild a damage caused by burns. You need outside help. The SEG gives you that help.
Mr. Searl.
Explosion, and today you look at my face, you'll never realize what that face should look like if it hadn't been for the SEG. being in my home.
We have another caller here, and after this, we want to ask you about your relocation. But real quick, area code 928. Are you with us? Welcome to Third Phase of Moon.
Yeah, this is Travis Walton.
Oh, Travis, how you doing? We are going to get to that panel in 10 minutes with Victoria after the next break, but feel free to stay on with us if you would like, or we could bring you back on in 12 minutes.
All right, this is an interesting topic. I'm enjoying.
Oh, by all means, stay in. If you have a question, go hop in whenever you want. But Mr. Searle, we wanted to ask you about this relocation. Bradley, you were talking about that briefly off air. You want to expand on that?
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, it's just that we're going to relocate him, give him what we call in the UK bigger digs. John, how about that? The new place?
That's a new place. Just over twice the size of this little place, which I hope we can then connect all the equipment up and get down to producing documentary films on the technology, and every component made in San Diego coming here will be fully tested, filmed and recorded. These films will become available through our internet connections. We want you to see what we're doing. We want you to see why we're doing it. And we also want to see what it will mean to you as benefits.
Bob, you had a burning question for Mr. Searle that I see you were written. Go ahead, Bob.
Yes, please. Dr. Searle, the SEG unit, can that be used in every type of vehicle, like a car, a lorry, a bus, motorhome?
Yes, the SEG, the second one online, will be for driving any type of road vehicle or rail vehicle. Road vehicle, we will guarantee the SEG will whip you up hills as quick as any other vehicle can. And certainly lorries will get up the hills just as fast. But the difference is it's silent. All you will hear is the air compressor for the brakes and the tires running on the road surface. That's the only noise you hear. And it's pretty dead quiet. The trouble is we're looking at how to solve the problem, to use the bow wave under the body of the car instead of tires, which means you'll then float over the surface instead of having to use wheels, which will eventually, tires will wear out. I don't want to put people out of work. What I want to do is create the employment field for people, to open up employment where at this time there's little or no employment because the cost for energy, and that is so high. Let's get the energy costs down to zero. Then we can all do things. We can all have the things we need for happy life, a happy family life, better health. I can only do the part of designing and putting it together and see it develop. I cannot do more than that. It's up to the people to support the drive. Let's get it done. A project for the people, by the people. We need you to make it happen.
Mr. Searle, has there been much interest from any of the local governments in funding or wanting to be a part of your research?
Now, sadly, they can't be seen because it's cutting the profits of the poor people. That I can understand. But you got a president in America who's come up from the floor and knows what life is like at the bottom end. He's the man everybody should be standing behind and say, please, get this technology moving in the USA. Make the funds available. Get the people to work. Let's clean up the country and make the USA a dream place for the world to copy. It can be done. It shall be done. But if I'm left all alone to do it, it's going to take a long time due to cost to do it.
Go ahead, Joe.
There's quite a few people here in America on the upper echelons that would make a statement as such. There's no money to be made in free electricity or free energy, and they might be a big part of the reason why it's been kept quiet for so long.
That is the problem. You've got it dead right.
It's like
it's us that must do it.
It's like curing a disease. There's no money. There's no money to be made in the cure.
Well, we could, if I may, Joe, thank you. If I may, what we've structured with Searl Technology, Inc., out of Florida, we structured a situation where if you look at the SEG, it takes a certain number of materials, component parts, manufacturing, and what we've done in terms of our agreements that we have presently in the world, Australia, Canada, Mexico, our agreements with China, what we will do is have a data set and task them to build parts, build components. Now, what does that mean? That means factories for China, factories for all of these different places to build component parts that will be in demand for these units. Now, we will magnetize those units and then send the functioning units back to those countries so that they can commercialize, sell, and reap the reward and benefit from commercializing their products. Now, what does all this activity do? It creates jobs. What we're living in is a paradigm shift. It is going to shift no matter what we do. The thing about it is we need to lean on the tiller a little bit if you can envision a ship. We don't want to steer the ship into the reef and everything crashes and burns. The day of the fossil fuels is coming to an end. We have had contact with the Middle East, high places in the Middle East, and what I call the caliphate, with all due respect to the Middle East. The elders in the petrodollar over there are passing away, and they have handed to their chosen sons the keys to the petrodollar. Now, the sons are wise. They know to the month how much oil is left. The sons of those powerful men in the Middle East that run that oil industry over there know that the paradigm has to shift. Not only do they know it, but they want it. The sons want the shift. We're in contact with people over there who are looking at what we're doing and saying, okay, this may be a viable alternative. We need to shift from the fossil fuel paradigm into the new paradigm, which is one of these emergent technologies. Again, we favor the Searl technology because of its benign state, and the entire manufacturing situation, the entire distribution and commercialization of this situation will not harm in terms of taking jobs away from people. It will actually open up maybe 2, 3, 4, 10 times the number of jobs, because an SEG can turn some area in the desert into something where water can be purified and plants can be grown, or fruit, or something that can withstand that climate. We could take a large 100-megawatt unit that's produced and drop it into a desolate place in Africa where they don't have any kind of infrastructure. What would happen if we were to, in a very generous way, give to this, simply sit a power source, 100-megawatt power source, in the middle of a desolate place in Africa somewhere, and then send in people to train those individuals? You know, these are human beings with minds and dreams and hopes and wishes, and if they were suddenly able to plug in a computer and go to school and get their minds off of starvation and into a situation where they can provide for themselves and learn, and what that resource, just that human resource all over this planet that is essentially being wasted. Why? Because they don't have power. The bottom line of everything in this paradigm shift is the word energy. And all people want to know is, where is it going to come from and how am I going to get it? Now, here's an opportunity. Let's change that paradigm, but it's not going to threaten in the way people realize. It is going to expand in an economic sense. It's going to make jobs, create jobs. John Roy, isn't that about right?